Today, we're going to look at the last selfies of people before getting mauled by wild animals. From a nurse who leaned too far over in a gorilla enclosure, to a Florida man that got dragged by a massive alligator. Let's dive right into it. It was August 3rd, 2014, when the ancient forest of Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee became the scene of a tragic encounter that would forever change how one family viewed the wilderness. Elkmont Campground nestled deep within the park's boundaries, surrounded by towering hemlock and oak trees that had stood for centuries. Summer nights in the Smokies brought a symphony of sounds from countless nocturnal creatures, but also the ever-present danger of human-wildlife conflicts. Carmen Whitfield, a 26-year-old veterinary technician from Portland, Oregon, had traveled across the country with their parents Robert and Linda Whitfield, along with their younger brother Tyler, for their first family camping adventure in bear country. Carmen's extensive experience working with domestic animals had given her confidence around wildlife, though she had never encountered the unpredictable nature of wild black bears. The family had chosen Elkmont for its reputation as one of the park's most scenic campgrounds, unaware that recent drought conditions had driven bears closer to human settlements. The American black bear stands as one of North America's most adaptable and intelligent omnivores, with adult males weighing up to 300 pounds and possessing strength 5 times greater than humans. These powerful animals can run at speeds reaching 30 miles per hour and climb trees with remarkable agility despite their bulk. Their exceptional sense of smell, 7 times stronger than a bloodhound's, allows them to detect food sources from miles away. Black bears possess powerful jaws capable of crushing bones, with bite forces exceeding 800 pounds per square inch. While generally avoiding human contact, bears that become habituated to human food sources can lose their natural fear and become increasingly aggressive. At 11:45 p.m., a 200-pound male black bear had been drawn to the Whitfield campsite by the scent of improperly stored food items that Carmen had left inside their tent rather than securing in the provided bear-proof canisters. When Carmen heard rustling sounds outside their tent, her veterinary background made her curious rather than cautious. Carmen's fatal mistake occurred when she unzipped the tent entrance and stepped outside to investigate, immediately spotting the large bear just 15 feet away as it rummaged through their scattered camping supplies. Instead of retreating, she reached for her phone to document what she believed would be an incredible wildlife encounter. The bear looked up and made direct eye contact with Carmen, showing no fear of human presence. The critical trigger came when Carmen activated her phone's camera flash while taking photos. The sudden bright light startled and agitated the animal, causing it to associate Carmen with a threat to its feeding opportunity. The bear stood on its hind legs, reaching nearly 6 feet in height, and began huffing loudly while swaying its massive head in an aggressive display. When Carmen stepped closer to capture a selfie with the standing bear, the animal interpreted this movement as a direct challenge. The bear dropped to all fours and charged across the campsite with explosive speed, its powerful legs propelling its 200-pound frame directly toward Carmen. The bear's initial attack knocked Carmen to the ground with tremendous force, its massive paw striking her across the chest and breaking 3 ribs on impact. The animal's 4-inch claws raked across her torso, creating deep lacerations that penetrated through her camping clothes and into the muscle tissue beneath. The black bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Carmen's left shoulder, its teeth penetrating through skin and muscle to reach the bone underneath. The bear's bite force crushed her clavicle and severed major blood vessels in her neck and shoulder region. The animal shook Carmen violently for nearly 10 seconds, its powerful neck muscles whipping her body back and forth. The bear's second bite targeted Carmen's neck area, its canine teeth puncturing her carotid artery and causing massive hemorrhaging. Blood immediately began pooling around her head and shoulders as her cardiovascular system went into shock from the rapid blood loss. The combination of crushing injuries to her chest and the severed artery created wounds that would prove fatal within minutes. Carmen's screams awakened her family members, who began shouting and banging camping equipment together in a desperate attempt to drive the bear away. The loud noises caused the bear to release Carmen and retreat approximately 20 feet, but the animal remained in the campsite. Robert Whitfield immediately applied pressure to Carmen's neck wound while Linda called emergency services. Tyler continued making noise to keep the bear at a distance while his father attempted to stem the massive bleeding. Despite their efforts, Carmen lost consciousness within 3 minutes due to hypovolemic shock. Park rangers and emergency medical personnel arrived via helicopter within 25 minutes, but Carmen had already succumbed to her injuries. The responsible bear was located and euthanized the following morning after wildlife officials determined it had become dangerously habituated to human food sources. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of food storage policies at Elkmont Campground, with park officials implementing additional bear-proof storage requirements and increased ranger patrols. Carmen's family established a wildlife safety education fund, emphasizing the critical importance of proper food storage in bear country. It was October 21, 2014. The western slopes of Lolo National Forest were quiet beneath the last light of day. At that hour, shadows pooled in the gullies, and the forest seemed to watch from the edges. Callie Mendez had been out here alone for just over an hour. Callie Mendez was a 28-year-old wilderness therapy counselor who had returned to Montana after a 2-year Peace Corps placement in the Philippines. She had taken a job with a wilderness therapy nonprofit near Missoula, counseling adolescents through hiking, backpacking, and survival challenges. Colleagues described her as calm, dependable, and passionate about guiding others through discomfort. On her days off, she preferred solitude, short day hikes, sunrises, and photography. She'd recently begun collecting fall landscape shots for a personal project. That Tuesday, she clocked out early and driven up a forest access road to a marked loop she knew well, roughly 4 miles, with a ridgeline overlook popular in autumn. She'd packed light, fleece, hiking boots, water, and her phone mounted to a small tripod. GPS ping showed her stopping near a rock cluster just after 5:30 p.m., where she spent the next 25 minutes positioning herself for photos. She wasn't far from the trail, maybe 100 feet, but elevation and brush had isolated her. She wouldn't have seen what was watching from above. The ridge behind her rose in layers of limestone and brush. Fallen pine needles covered the trail, making each step silent. Somewhere above, a male cougar, later measured at 122 pounds, moved quietly through the shadows. Earlier that day, 2 backcountry hikers had seen the same cat farther east, near a drainage trail. They'd reported it casually to a ranger they passed, but no formal alert had gone out. With no warning signs at the trailhead, Mendez had no reason to suspect danger. Mountain lions are solitary ambush predators found throughout western North America, with adult males weighing up to 220 pounds and possessing incredible strength and agility. Their massive paws are equipped with retractable claws over 2 inches long, designed to grip and tear flesh. These cats prefer to hunt from elevated terrain, using cover to stalk silently before leaping distances of up to 40 feet. Unlike bears, cougars do not bluff charge. When they commit to an attack, it's sudden, silent, and fatal. Mendez crouched, stood, and turned repeatedly, adjusting the camera, walking back to check the framing, then stepping into position again. Her back was exposed for minutes at a time, a fatal mistake when sharing territory with an ambush predator. Mountain lions are evolutionarily programmed to attack from behind, targeting the neck and spine to deliver a quick kill. The repeated exposure of her back and neck would have triggered every predatory instinct the cougar possessed. Roughly 650 feet uphill, a retired Forest Service employee named Jerry Hooper had stopped to watch the light change. He later told investigators he noticed the animal before he noticed her. He described seeing it crouched low but moving closer, downhill and slow, before it disappeared over the edge. The attack happened silent at first. Hooper saw the cougar leap a clean, fast arc from above the rocks and land hard on Mendez's back. She screamed once, but the sound was cut off almost instantly as the animal clamped its jaws around the back of her neck. Hooper described the cat's legs digging in as it bit down again, lower this time, around the base of her skull, its body jerking violently as it tried to subdue her. Her limbs kicked wildly at first, then slowed as the cougar dragged her off the boulder into a gully below, gripping with claws and repeatedly adjusting its bite. Hooper ran down slow, but steep ground and brush slowed him. By the time he reached the area, the cat had backed away into shadow, and Mendez was motionless. Her body lay twisted between rocks, eyes open. According to the autopsy, the impact had fractured her skull and broken ribs. Deep claw marks crossed her shoulders and side. There was no sign she had fought back. The attack had been too swift and devastating for any defensive response. Authorities arrived after nightfall, following Hooper's call. Mendez's GPS and Hooper's account narrowed the search area. Her body was recovered around 9 p.m. and transported under Forest Service escort to Missoula. Wildlife officers spent the next 2 days tracking the cat, using scent dogs and trail cameras. It was located on October 23rd and euthanized after confirmation by scat and paw print analysis. Mendez's employer held a small memorial at the therapy center that weekend. Several clients spoke, as did her former Peace Corps supervisor. Her family, originally from Colorado, declined interviews and requested privacy. Authorities released a formal incident report the following week, urging hikers to remain vigilant even on well-marked trails and announcing updated signage at 10 regional trailheads. In coordination with state wildlife officials, they also implemented a targeted educational campaign about predator encounters for wilderness therapy groups operating in the area. It was May 10, 2014 at Sunset Zoo in Manhattan, Kansas. The spring weather was mild, and sunlight broke through the trees, lighting the walkways in uneven patches. Families moved slowly between exhibits, some pushing strollers while others carried snacks from the concession stand. At the chimpanzee habitat, visitors leaned on the waist-high viewing rail, pointing out the animals as they moved through their space. Among the visitors that afternoon was 38-year-old Samuel Adeyemi from Kansas City. He worked as a salesman for a regional appliance company, spending much of his week traveling to meet clients. Friends and family described him as playful and easygoing, someone who enjoyed making people laugh. He especially liked watching animal clips online, with chimpanzees being a favorite. When his younger brother suggested a short weekend road trip, Samuel agreed. The zoo hadn't been part of their original plan, but when they saw a sign for it on the way into town, they decided to make a stop before dinner. The brothers moved at a relaxed pace through the grounds, stopping at the small carnivore exhibit before following a curved path toward the chimpanzee area. Samuel's brother pointed ahead to where a few people were gathered at the railing. The sounds of the chimps carried faintly down the path, quick, sharp hoots mixed with the rustle of movement inside the enclosure. As they got closer, Samuel pulled out his phone, already in camera mode. The chimpanzee habitat had trees, climbing structures, and ropes tied between posts. The ground was a mix of dirt, grass, and straw. A shallow trench and low concrete walls separated the shade, while others climbed or groomed each other. The largest male sat near the front, watching people at the rail. Chimpanzees are powerful primates, far stronger than humans of similar size. Adult males can weigh over 120 pounds and have the muscle strength to overpower grown adults. In the wild, they use this strength for climbing, foraging, and defending their group. They can move quickly when provoked, and their teeth can cause severe injury in seconds. Zoos design habitats with barriers to keep a safe distance between visitors and the animals. But leaning over or reaching across those barriers can still bring someone too close. Samuel noticed the big male sitting only a few yards away and decided it would make a good photo. He pulled a granola bar from his pocket, holding it in one hand and his phone in the other. Leaning over the rail, he tried to get the chimp's attention while keeping himself and the animal in the same frame. A nearby staff member saw him and called out to step back. Samuel laughed and stayed in place, adjusting his position for a better angle. His brother told him to be careful, but Samuel leaned a little farther, resting his forearms on the rail. The male chimp moved closer, first on all fours, then standing to grip the edge of the trench wall. Samuel raised the granola bar slightly, angling the phone for another shot. The chimp suddenly reached forward, grabbed the front of Samuel's shirt, and yanked hard. The pull was strong enough to drag him over the rail. He lost his balance and fell into the trench, landing on the packed dirt. Other chimps rushed toward the commotion. Two grabbed at his arms, while the larger male bit down on his forearm, tearing into the skin. Witnesses heard sharp hoots and saw the chimps pulling and shaking him. Samuel tried to twist away, but another chimp bit his shoulder. Staff members ran in with long poles, shouting and trying to push the animals back. The chimps moved quickly, some retreating, others darting in for more bites. The largest male clamped his jaws around Samuel's neck briefly before staff used the water hose to drive him off. Samuel lay on his side, bleeding heavily. His shirt was ripped and one shoe had come off during the struggle. Staff reached him quickly and pulled him toward a service gate while the remaining chimps were moved back into the enclosure. His phone was left in the trench with a cracked screen, and the granola bar was flattened in the dirt a few feet away. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but the injuries were severe. He had deep bites on his arms, shoulder, and neck, and was losing blood rapidly. Paramedics treated him at the scene, but he was pronounced dead before they could take him to the hospital. His brother stayed nearby as zoo staff closed the area and guided visitors toward the exits. The zoo closed the chimpanzee exhibit for the rest of the day. Officials later explained that the enclosure met safety standards, but that leaning over the rail had brought Samuel close enough for the animal to grab him. They reminded visitors that chimps, despite their intelligence and human-like behaviors, are still wild animals capable of sudden aggression. An internal review led to new rules requiring staff to monitor the area more closely on busy days. Warning signs were updated to include images of safe viewing positions. The zoo didn't release security footage of the incident, and media coverage was brief, limited to local outlets. Samuel's funeral took place the following week in Kansas City. It was a small service, attended by family, close friends, and a few co-workers. His brother declined interviews, and the family asked for privacy. The phone recovered from the trench had one last image saved, a slightly blurred shot showing Samuel's face close to the railing, the chimp in the background watching him. It was August 4th, 2013. Heat pressed down on Limpopo province like a weight, the air dry and still across the South African bushveld. Somewhere in the shade of scattered trees, a pride of lions rested through the midday hours. From the safety of their safari vehicle, tourists peered through telephoto lenses and whispered excitedly. But safety, as always, depended on staying where you belonged. Claire Dooley had lived in Pretoria for 8 years. working as a veterinary laboratory technician at the University Animal Sciences Department. At 52, the British expatriate possessed the kind of confidence that came from years of handling livestock samples and monitoring wildlife disease protocols. Her colleagues knew her as assertive and uncompromising, traits that served her well in laboratory settings, but proved dangerous when applied to wild animals. That August, Claire's younger sisters had flown in from England for their first African safari experience. She had booked a 2-day stay at a private game lodge on the western edge of Kruger National Park's buffer zone, eager to share her adopted country's natural wonders with family who had never ventured beyond London's suburbs. African lions in protected reserves like those scattered across Limpopo province have grown accustomed to the rumble of diesel engines and the sight of boxy safari vehicles. But their tolerance extends only to these familiar intrusions. The moment a human silhouette appears outside the protective metal shell, ancient predatory instincts activate with lethal efficiency. Lions can accelerate from 0 to 35 miles per hour in under 3 seconds, covering 50 feet in less than a second and a half, faster than most people can register the threat. Their retractable claws measure up to 1.5 inches long, sharp enough to shred through skin and muscle, while a single swipe can deliver over 400 pounds of force. Their bite exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bone and anchoring prey during a takedown. On their second morning, Claire's group joined the scheduled game drive with a lodge-employed guide. Just after 11 a.m., their vehicle approached a granite outcropping where 7 lions had claimed the shade for their afternoon rest. Most of the pride lay sprawled in typical feline relaxation, their golden coats blending seamlessly with the dried grass. Cameras clicked softly as tourists captured the scene through open windows. Claire studied the composition through her phone's viewfinder. One lioness lay particularly close to the road, her massive head resting on crossed paws. The angle was perfect for the kind of photograph that would dominate her social media feed for months. Without consulting the guide or informing her sisters, she quietly opened the rear passenger door and stepped onto the packed dirt road. The guide's sharp command to return to the vehicle immediately cut through the morning air. Claire raised her free hand dismissively, assuring him she needed just one quick photograph before climbing back inside. She took several careful steps toward the resting lioness, her phone already raised to capture the perfect shot. What Claire failed to notice was the young male lion concealed in tall grass just 20 feet to her right. Partially hidden by a mopane bush, he had been watching the vehicle with the focused attention that precedes an attack. Unlike the relaxed females, his muscles were coiled and ready. The lion exploded from his hiding place, crossing the open ground between bush and road in a blur of tawny muscle and extended claws. Claire froze mid-step, caught completely off guard, as 400 pounds of apex predator struck her from behind. The impact drove her face first into the dirt as massive jaws clamped down on her neck and upper back. Screams erupted from the safari vehicle as the lion's claws raked across Claire's shoulder and scalp. Blood soaked through her khaki shirt within seconds as the predator's canine teeth, designed to crush vertebrae and sever spinal cords, found their mark with devastating precision. The guide leaped from the driver's seat, grabbing the lodge-issued rifle from its mounted bracket. His warning shot cracked across the bushveld, causing the lion to flinch but not release his grip. Claire's screams had already weakened to barely audible gasps. A second safari vehicle appeared from the opposite direction, its guide immediately recognizing the emergency. He accelerated toward the attack, using the vehicle's size and engine noise to force the lion's retreat. The predator finally released Claire and backed away several yards, tail twitching with agitation as he assessed this new threat. When the guides reached her, no pulse could be detected. The lion's attack had caused massive trauma to her cervical spine, with deep lacerations severing major blood vessels in her neck. The blood loss had been catastrophic and irreversible. Despite immediate attempts at resuscitation, Claire was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities launched an immediate investigation. Their findings confirmed the incident as a fatal mauling resulting from a clear violation of established safari protocols. The lions involved were not destroyed, as wildlife officials determined the attack represented predictable defensive behavior rather than aberrant aggression. The young male had simply responded to what he perceived as a territorial intrusion. Claire's remains were transported to Johannesburg, then repatriated to England by her grieving sisters. A private funeral in Norfolk drew family members and former colleagues who remembered her dedication to animal welfare. South African media coverage remained brief and factual, public attention shifting quickly to other stories. The lodge resumed operations within weeks, implementing stricter guest briefing procedures and additional safety protocols. New signage throughout Limpopo's private reserves now emphasizes the lethal consequences of leaving vehicles during big cat encounters. It was August 17, 2015 in Big Cypress National Preserve, Florida. The summer air was thick and hot, heavy with the smell of mud and wet plants. Insects buzzed constantly, and the sound of distant water birds echoed through the swamp. Tour boats slowly made their way through narrow channels, carrying visitors hoping to see alligators, herons, and other wildlife. Most days here ended without trouble. This day would not. Daniel Floyd was 34 years old and worked as an office printer technician in Tampa. He lived a quiet life and wasn't the type to take big risks. His favorite hobby was photography, but he didn't post his pictures online. He just liked keeping them for himself. When his two friends invited him on a weekend camping trip, he thought it would be a good way to relax, take some nice pictures, and enjoy nature. He wasn't thinking about danger. The group booked a guided airboat tour through one of the quieter sections of the preserve. The guide promised them views of alligators, wading birds, and maybe even a black bear if they were lucky. Daniel's camera never left his hand, and by midday he had filled half a memory card. He had no particular goal other than to take home pictures that made the trip worth remembering. What none of them knew was that a predator not native to this land had been moving through the area. They moved through shallow, dark water with patches of grass and tall cypress trees. The air was hot and sunlight reflected off the surface. It looked calm, but there could still be danger. What Daniel and his friends didn't know was that in this same stretch of swamp, a large predator had been moving quietly for weeks. Jaguars aren't native to Florida. They live in parts of Central and South America, where they're known for their spotted coats, heavy build, and strong hunting skills. A full-grown male can weigh over 200 pounds and has one of the strongest bite forces of any big cat, able to crush bones. They hunt by staying hidden and attacking in short, sudden bursts. The one in the preserve had escaped from a private collection a few miles away and had been spotted a few times by rangers, but it always slipped away before they could capture it. That afternoon, Daniel and his friends saw it for themselves. The jaguar was stretched out on a low branch that hung over the water, its head resting between its paws. At first, it didn't move. The guide identified it immediately and told the group to stay still. The airboat was floating about 30 feet away, close enough for them to see the shape of its head and movement of its sides as it breathed. Daniel's friends wanted him to get a better picture. They told him it would be something worth keeping, and they laughed as they encouraged him. The guide said it again that jaguars are unpredictable and should be given space. Daniel looked around and spotted a large cypress log lying partly in the water and partly up onto the shore. From the log's end, the view to the branch would be clear and unobstructed. Before the guide could react, Daniel stepped off the airboat and balanced himself on the log. He carried his camera in one hand and slowly made his way forward, watching the jaguar. His friends reminded him to be quick before the animal moved. The jaguar did move, lifting its head and watching him. Then it climbed down from the branch with slow, heavy steps and disappeared into the tall grass at the water's edge. For a few seconds, Daniel and the others couldn't see it. When it appeared again, it was already close. It covered the last few feet in a fast, quiet rush and leapt onto Daniel, hitting him hard enough to knock him off the log and into the shallow water. His camera dropped from his hand. The jaguar's jaws closed on his shoulder, and it began pulling him toward the sawgrass. Daniel's friends shouted and threw sticks, and the guide revved the airboat's engine to make noise. The jaguar kept moving, dragging him through the water. Mud swirled up, turning it cloudy. Daniel's legs kicked for a moment before disappearing into the thick plants. The jaguar's back rose briefly above the grass, then vanished from sight. Rangers arrived within an hour after the guide called for help. They followed the trail through the swamp and found torn clothing, one shoe, and Daniel's camera in shallow water. The last picture on the memory card showed a blurred image of the animal's fur. A short distance away, they found the body partly covered with leaves and branches, a sign that the jaguar intended to return to it later. In the next 2 days, rangers set traps and closed the area to visitors. The jaguar was seen again nearby and was euthanized to prevent further incidents. It was later confirmed to have escaped from a private property that kept exotic animals illegally. The owner was fined but not jailed. Daniel's funeral in Tampa was small, attended by family and a few close friends. The incident was not widely reported, and many people never heard about it. For those who were there, the sight of the jaguar leaving with Daniel stayed in their memory. Life in the preserve returned to normal. Tour boats, birds over the water, and the steady hum of insects. But for those who knew what had happened, it was a reminder that danger can be close, even in a place that looks calm. It was November 2nd, 2017 at Wildlife Safari Park in Winston, Oregon. The weather was cool with light cloud cover. Cars moved slowly through the drive-through areas, engines idling as visitors looked for animals in the open spaces. In the tiger section, a single tiger was lying on the ground near the edge of the road, watching the passing vehicles. The area was quiet, and there were no signs that anything out of the ordinary was about to happen. Rohit Sharma was 24 and had recently graduated from a university in Portland. He was working part-time while looking for a full-time job. Outside of work, he often went on short day trips with friends and co-workers. Photography was one of his hobbies. He liked getting close-up shots of wildlife and nature. His pictures were organized in albums on his computer and phone, and he added new ones after each trip. This visit to the park was meant to be a relaxed afternoon with two co-workers, a break from routine and a chance to take a few new photos. The group entered the tiger section in mid-afternoon. They followed another car at a slow pace along the road. At the entrance, signs clearly warned visitors to keep their windows closed at all times in predator areas. Rohit had seen the signs but preferred taking pictures without window glare. He lowered the passenger window for a clearer view. When he spotted the tiger lying in the grass, he leaned out slightly to get a better shot. His co-workers told him to be careful, but he kept adjusting his position. The tiger's habitat covered a large area. The ground was a mix of dry grass and bare dirt with some scattered trees. The road looped through, keeping a set distance between cars and the tree line. The tiger was lying on its side, head raised, looking toward the vehicles. Its tail moved slowly in the dirt. The setting was quiet, except for the low hum of idling engines. Bengal tigers can weigh over 400 pounds. They can run up to 40 miles per hour in short bursts and are powerful enough to bring down prey much larger than a human. Their claws can grip and pull strongly, and their bite can crush bone. Tigers often aim for the neck or throat to quickly disable their prey. Even in captivity, their hunting instincts remain, and sudden movement or a nearby opening can trigger them to react. Rohit took a few pictures, but the angle wasn't what he wanted. He leaned farther out, placing his upper body halfway outside the car window. The tiger's tail flicked once, and its ears moved forward. It slowly rose to its feet, lowering its head as it began to walk toward the road. At first, the movement was steady and unhurried. Then, in a sudden burst, the tiger broke into a run. Its body stayed low to the ground, and its long strides covered the open space quickly. Rohit started to pull himself back inside the vehicle, but the tiger reached the roadside before he could get fully in. It lifted a front paw and hooked his arm with its claws. The pull was forceful enough to unbalance him. Rohit fell from the car and landed on the dirt. The tiger reached him instantly. It pressed him down with its weight and bit into his side. Witnesses in nearby cars saw him try to push the animal away, but the tiger shifted its grip to his neck. The hold was firm, and the attack continued for several seconds. The sound was a mix of low growls and movement against the ground. Several drivers sounded their horns. Park rangers arrived within moments in a truck. They fired warning shots into the air. The noise startled the tiger, and it released Rohit, backing away toward the tree line. Rangers reached him quickly and pulled him farther from the road. His injuries were severe. The bite to his neck had caused heavy bleeding, and he was unresponsive. Paramedics entered once the rangers confirmed the area was secure. They began emergency care immediately, but the blood loss was too great. Rohit was pronounced dead within minutes. His camera was found on the ground near the vehicle. It was scratched and damaged, but the memory card was still intact. The last photo was slightly blurred, but showed the tiger standing and facing toward the road. The park closed the tiger section for the rest of the day. Staff reviewed their safety measures and began planning changes. Within a few weeks, the park announced new rules requiring all vehicles, including visitor cars, to either have window bars installed or keep all windows fully closed in predator areas. Rohit's body was returned to Portland for cremation. His funeral service was attended by family, close friends, and his 2 co-workers who had been with him at the park. The incident was covered briefly by local news, but received little attention outside the region. The tiger involved in the attack remained in the park. Staff made changes to keep it farther from the road during public visits. For the rangers and visitors who saw the event, the memory was clear. How quickly the tiger had moved, how little time there had been to react, and how a choice to lean out of a window had led to a fatal result. It was April 8, 2015. The midday heat in the lower reaches of Bannerghatta, just outside Bengaluru, pressed heavily on the open walkways of the biological park. Dry leaves crackled underfoot, and groups of tourists milled about in the hazy warmth. Around the tiger habitat, crowds lingered longer, drawn by something powerful and predatory lurking just beyond the barriers. Pravin Kulkarni was a 26-year-old line technician from Hubli, visiting with 4 co-workers from the automotive parts factory where he worked. It was a Saturday team outing, loosely organized and casually supervised. Pravin was well liked at the factory, known for his sense of humor and habit of posting daily selfies to his WhatsApp groups. He had recently bought a mid-range smartphone and was experimenting with video clips for social media, hoping to start a channel highlighting travel spots around Karnataka. Friends described him as bold but not foolish. a characterization that would later prove tragically ironic. The group reached the tiger exhibit around 1:45 p.m., where several Bengal tigers were visible across a shallow moat. Bengal tigers are among the most powerful big cats on Earth, with males weighing up to 660 pounds and possessing the strength to drag prey twice their size. Their massive paws are equipped with retractable claws up to 4 inches long, designed to grip and tear flesh with devastating efficiency. A tiger's bite force can exceed 1,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. The enclosure had a low rail to guide foot traffic with warning signs in Kannada and English advising visitors not to cross or lean over. Like many government-run parks in India, Bannerghatta suffered from staff shortages. Only one guard was visible that afternoon, posted 300 feet away by the elephant pen, too far to oversee the predator enclosures. Though signs warned of danger, they were easy to overlook without active enforcement. Pravin, noticing that 2 tigers appeared to be sleeping near the rocks, stepped over the rail despite protests from his co-worker Samir, who warned him against being stupid for social media likes. Pravin laughed and waved off the concern, positioning himself just beyond the barrier for what he believed would be the perfect shot. Standing at the concrete edge, he crouched facing Samir's camera phone. The others watched, some uncertain, some entertained by his boldness. In the background, the larger male tiger had risen, previously hidden behind the mound of grass and completely unnoticed by the distracted tourists. Tigers are masters of stealth, capable of moving through dense vegetation without making a sound. Their striped coats provide perfect camouflage, breaking up their outline and allowing them to remain invisible until the moment they choose to strike. The tiger moved low and fast across the moat before anyone had time to react. With a single bound that demonstrated the incredible power of its hind legs, it landed on the embankment and struck with devastating force. The massive predator seized Pravin by the left leg, dragging him down onto the rocks with such speed that Samir's video jolted violently. Pravin screamed, flailing with both hands, trying desperately to twist away from the tiger's grip. The animal clamped higher onto his hip and back, and pulled him halfway into the enclosure with effortless strength. Chaos erupted among the horrified spectators. Bystanders screamed in terror. Samir dropped his phone as he watched his friend being mauled. One guard fired a blank round into the air, but the sound only startled the tiger momentarily. It crouched defensively, then reasserted its grip with a deep, rumbling snarl. The attack was brutal and efficient, lasting less than 30 seconds. By the time staff arrived with poles and whistles, Pravin was motionless. The tiger had bitten through his lower spine and partially severed his neck, then dragged the body several feet before releasing it. Blood stained the rocks and ran thin into the moat, creating a horrific scene that would haunt witnesses for years to come. The animal did not retreat until zookeepers approached in a vehicle and forced it back with sound blasts. Emergency services called by the officials arrived in 20 minutes and declared Pravin dead at the scene. His body was retrieved under the supervision of forest officials and taken to a morgue in Bengaluru. Pravin's family brought his remains home to Hubli, where a cremation was held. Local officials offered condolences, but emphasized that park warnings had been clearly posted and deliberately ignored. New fencing was installed within weeks, raising the physical barrier and placing additional signs in multiple languages as a deterrent to future risk-takers. Officials closed the park for 2 days, citing a need to review perimeter barriers and visitor compliance. The tiger involved was not euthanized. It remained in the enclosure, considered to have acted according to its natural predatory instincts rather than displaying abnormal aggression. It was December 12, 2016. The estuary at Cahuita stretched wide and still as December twilight settled over Costa Rica's Caribbean coast. Where the Rio Estrella met the sea, mud banks emerged from receding waters, and the jungle behind Playa Negra grew quiet. But beneath the surface, ancient predators waited with endless patience. Felipe Rivera had arrived that weekend with 3 university friends, escaping his routine as a middle school science teacher in San Jose. At 30, he possessed the kind of restless energy that turned simple beach trips into adventures. His colleagues knew him for his humor and his ability to find stories in the mundane. Over the holiday break, the group had rented a coastal cottage, splitting their time between hiking trails and exploring the brackish waters where river met ocean. Warning signs dotted the area around the river mouth. A weathered red placard attached to a concrete footbridge displayed "Peligro Cocodrilos" in bold letters. Felipe and his friends had crossed that bridge multiple times during their stay, joking about crocodiles lurking so close to the tourist zone. The idea seemed almost absurd given the peaceful setting and steady stream of visitors. They overlooked that the American crocodile thrives in these transitional zones throughout Central America. Growing up to 15 feet in length, these apex predators patrol estuaries and coastal rivers with methodical precision. Unlike their more aggressive African cousins, they typically avoid human contact, preferring fish, birds, and small mammals. But when opportunity presents itself, their explosive power and ambush tactics make them devastatingly effective killers. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the water, Felipe spotted movement on the opposite bank. A crocodile lay motionless, half submerged, with only its eyes and ridged back visible above the waterline. From the bridge above, his friend Carla aimed her phone camera at the scene. Felipe grinned and announced his intention to create the perfect jungle photograph. He descended the muddy slope and waded into the brown water. First ankle deep, then to his knees, he moved closer to frame the shot. The visible crocodile remained perfectly still. Behind him, Carla urged him to hurry while the others watched with nervous laughter. Felipe positioned himself sideways to capture the best angle. But the attack came without warning. A second crocodile, completely hidden beneath the murky surface, erupted from the water. Its massive jaws clamped down on Felipe's left thigh with bone-crushing pressure. The impact sent him sprawling sideways as his scream pierced the evening air. He clawed desperately at the water, trying to regain his footing, but the predator twisted its body in its signature death roll. The violent rotation dragged Felipe deeper into the channel as his friends screamed from the bridge. One shoe tore free and floated away as the water turned crimson around the thrashing bodies. Felipe kicked frantically with his free leg, but the crocodile's grip was absolute. The animal rolled again, submerging both predator and prey beneath the surface. Bubbles rose from the depths as the struggle continued underwater. A local fisherman, alerted by the screams, sprinted from a nearby dock with a bamboo pole. He charged into the shallows, but by the time he reached the attack site, only ripples and blood remained. The crocodile had vanished with its victim into the deeper channels of the estuary. The fisherman called for help. Local authorities and park officials arrived within the hour and scoured the river mouth throughout the night, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. They recovered only Felipe's sandal and fragments of torn clothing. The murky water revealed nothing else. At dawn, 2 experienced divers entered the estuary. They located Felipe's body 80 yards downstream, wedged beneath a tangle of submerged roots. The crocodile had consumed his left arm entirely, and massive trauma to his torso indicated prolonged feeding. His left femur was shattered from the initial attack. Investigators confirmed the presence of at least 2 adult American crocodiles in the immediate area. Track measurements suggested the larger specimen exceeded 13 feet in length. Authorities made no attempt to capture or relocate the animals, recognizing their natural right to inhabit these waters. Felipe's remains were transported to San Jose 2 days later. His funeral drew fellow teachers, former students, and family members who remembered his infectious enthusiasm for life. The estuary continues to harbor crocodiles. Additional signage now warns visitors in Spanish, English, and German about the dangers lurking beneath the deceptively calm surface. It was January 14, 2013, on the outskirts of Las Vegas, Nevada. The weather was cool and clear, with sunlight stretching across the dry ground. At a small exotic animal ranch, the morning routine moved along quietly. Workers cleaned cages, refilled water containers, and prepared food for the animals. In one corner of the property, a lioness lay stretched out in the sun. From a distance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Peter von Rensburg was 42 and lived in Henderson, Nevada. He worked as a construction foreman, a job that kept him indoors most days and required him to make quick decisions. Friends described him as confident and bold, the kind of person who rarely turned down a challenge. He had known the ranch owner for years through a mutual friend and had visited the property before. On this day, he stopped by to see a friend who worked there. The visit wasn't planned, but he had the afternoon off and decided to drop in. Peter had a habit of taking photos whenever he visited interesting places. He wasn't a professional photographer and didn't post much online, but he liked to keep snapshots of memorable moments. Around animals, he often acted without much caution. To him, the large cats behind fences were still dangerous, but he trusted the barriers and the fact that the animals were cared for by experienced handlers. That trust made him more relaxed than he should have been. The ranch was small, with chain-link enclosures, lock gates, and warning signs. Inside were shaded spots, water troughs, and platforms for the animals. The ground was dry and dusty, and only a few workers and visitors were there. The lioness in this enclosure weighed close to 300 pounds. Lions are powerful predators, capable of running at high speed over short distances and delivering a bite strong enough to crush bone. A lion's attack method usually involves knocking prey off balance, then biting the throat or neck to disable it. This lioness was used to people nearby because she had been hand-fed for part of her life, but that familiarity did not make her tame. Her instincts were still intact, and the fence was her only barrier from those outside. Peter walked slowly along the fence line, glancing at the different parts of the enclosure. The lioness was lying in the sun on the far side, her body stretched out and her tail flicking now and then. He kept walking until he reached a section where the bottom corner of the chain-link fence was bent upward. The metal was discolored in spots, possibly from years of sun and rain, and the wire looked slightly warped, as if the animal had pushed against it before. The opening wasn't large, but it was big enough that a determined animal could press through. He stopped there, crouching to get a clear angle for his phone. From that position, he had an unobstructed view of the lioness. She lifted her head, her eyes fixed on him. A worker who had been walking nearby noticed where Peter was standing and called for him to step back from the fence. Peter stayed where he was, making small adjustments to his phone to line up another shot. The lioness shifted her weight and rolled slightly onto her stomach. Her ears flattened against her head and her body lowered toward the ground. She began moving toward him, slowly at first, her steps almost silent on the packed dirt. When she closed the distance to just a few feet from the fence, her movement changed. She dropped her head lower and pressed her body forward, pushing through the bent section in one quick motion. She reached Peter before he could react, knocking him backward onto the ground. Her front paws came down hard on his chest and shoulder, while her teeth clamped onto his thigh. The bite was deep and strong, and blood appeared almost immediately. Peter tried to push against her front legs, but she let go of his thigh and bit into the side of his neck. Witnesses later said she gave 2 short shakes before holding still, her jaws locked in place. 2 workers who had been nearby ran to grab fire extinguishers from a storage area. They sprayed bursts of the white chemical toward the lioness's face. She paused, stepping back a few feet, then turned and pushed herself back through the same opening in the fence. The workers pulled Peter several feet away from the gap. His injuries were severe, with heavy bleeding from his neck and leg, and he was not breathing. Emergency responders were called immediately, but it was clear the damage had been fatal. Emergency services were called immediately, but by the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Peter was pronounced dead at the scene. The sheriff's office took statements from the workers and the few other people present. They confirmed that the bent section of fencing had been there for at least several days. No one had reported it as a serious risk until the attack happened. The ranch closed to visitors for the rest of the week. Workers repaired the damaged fence and checked all other enclosures for weaknesses. The USDA opened a quiet investigation into the facility's safety standards, but no public statements were made beyond confirming that the attack had taken place. Peter's funeral was held a few days later in Henderson. The service was small, attended by family, close friends, and some of his co-workers from the construction site. A short obituary was printed in the local newspaper. It mentioned his years of work, his family, and his love of the outdoors, but did not go into detail about the circumstances of his death. At the ranch, the lioness remained in her enclosure. Staff avoided talking about the incident to visitors, but the bent fence was remembered by those who had seen it. For the workers who had been there that day, the image of her pushing through the gap stayed clear, a reminder that even a small flaw in a barrier can be enough for an animal to act on its instincts. It was August 17, 2015. The air in the southern Pontanal was thick with heat and insects, the late dry season afternoon pressing on the wetlands. The river moved slowly past banks lined with half-submerged logs and tangles of brush. For hours, birds had called from the canopy, and a sense of quiet curiosity filled the group. But just across the water, lying low in the shadows, something watched and waited. Andre Ribeiro was a 34-year-old chemical technician from Sao Paulo who had taken the trip as a break from his demanding job. His friends described him as restless during vacations, often turning calm outings into something more intense. Late-night hikes, close-up wildlife shots, pushing beyond guide recommendations. He wasn't reckless for attention, just prone to chasing proximity to wildness. A habit that had made past trips memorable but sometimes uncomfortable. This bird-watching holiday had been planned months in advance, meant to be slower, quieter. Ribeiro wasn't a wildlife expert, but he'd read enough to know what lived in the Pantanal: capybaras, caimans, toucans, and jaguars. His goal for the trip was clear from the start: spot one, maybe get a decent picture. But on the 4th day upriver, he got more than he bargained for. When their boat guide pointed out a young adult jaguar lying across the water, motionless on a sandbar and partially hidden by grass, Ribeiro didn't hesitate. He announced his intention to get closer. The guide told him no. So did one of the others. But the cat wasn't moving. It would have helped him to know that jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, with adult males in the Pantanal averaging over 220 pounds and capable of delivering a bite force exceeding 1,500 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone and pierce skulls. Though primarily ambush hunters, they are highly territorial and respond aggressively when approached on foot. The opposite riverbank was quiet. It was here, roughly 80 feet from the jaguar's resting place, that Ribeiro knelt with his phone. Behind him, the big cat remained still, but the tip of its tail flicked, a subtle instinctive signal of rising focus or agitation. He spoke softly to his friend, took one photo, then another, this time with his back turned. According to the guide, the jaguar's breathing changed. The head lifted slightly, shoulders tensed. The shift in posture signals a predator preparing to act. In the wild, these signals warn other animals of imminent danger, but humans often misinterpret them as curiosity or mild interest. The guide warned again, louder now, shouting that it was standing. Ribiero's friend stepped back, uncertain, but Ribiero stayed crouched, aiming for one more shot. Then the cat moved. No snarl, no bluff. It took a silent step, then another, then charged. The jaguar's paws kicked up dust as it closed the gap with shocking speed. Ribiero turned, but too late. The cat struck mid-leap, forelimbs outstretched, claws raking deep across his chest and shoulder as it drove him to the ground. Witnesses said he hit hard, flat on his back, the phone skidding toward the river as he screamed once, short and sharp. The jaguar clamped its jaws around the base of his neck and shook violently, tearing muscle from spine with a wet crack. The guide screamed and raised his rifle, but firing would have risked hitting both. Blood pulsed onto the sand as the cat adjusted its grip, briefly releasing to bite again, lower, crushing the windpipe. The friend ran. The guide hesitated, then fired a warning shot skyward, the sound echoing uselessly across the water. The shot startled birds into flight but didn't slow the jaguar. It dragged Ribiero by the shoulders, limp now into the edge of the forest. The dragging left a gouged trail through dry leaves and soft mud, broken by occasional drops of blood. The entire encounter, from charge to disappearance into the underbrush, lasted less than 60 seconds. Authorities from the Mato Grosso State Environmental Agency were contacted by the guide via satellite phone and arrived 5 hours later by boat, delayed by low river levels, dense vegetation, and the need to coordinate with the nearby conservation station. Tranquilizers were deployed to secure the area before searchers entered the brush. They found Ribiero's body roughly 200 feet from the river, partially covered in disturbed soil and leaves, an instinctive cache by the jaguar. His face and chest showed deep punctures. Death had been nearly instantaneous from cervical spine trauma. The funeral was held 4 days later in Sao Paulo, attended by immediate family and a few co-workers. A closed casket was used, and the service remained quiet, with no press or public statement from the family. No charges were filed against the guide. Officials issued a brief public note reminding visitors of safety protocols in protected areas, stating that Ribiero had ignored multiple warnings. His name appeared in 2 short regional reports and was soon overtaken by other news. March 8, 2017, when the crystal-clear waters of New Smyrna Beach in Florida became the scene of an unthinkable tragedy. The Atlantic coastline stretched for miles, with gentle waves lapping against the pristine white sand as the morning sun cast golden reflections across the surface. Ponce Inlet's famous fishing pier extended 948 feet into the open ocean, attracting anglers from across the state who arrived before dawn to catch the best fishing conditions. The murky waters beneath the pier churned with activity as schools of mullet and other baitfish moved through the area, creating the perfect hunting ground for the ocean's apex predators. Leela Davenport, a 28-year-old dental hygienist from Phoenix, Arizona, had traveled to Florida's East Coast with her boyfriend Marcus Reed for their first spring break vacation together. Both were strong swimmers who had grown up in landlocked Arizona, making this ocean adventure particularly exciting for the couple. Leela's adventurous spirit and desire to document every moment of their trip had led them to wake up early that morning, hoping to capture the perfect sunrise photos before the beach became crowded with tourists. Marcus had planned to photograph Leela from their pier while she snorkeled in the shallow waters below, unaware that the early morning hours coincided with peak feeding time for the area's most dangerous residents. The bull shark ranks among the ocean's most aggressive predators, capable of thriving in both saltwater and freshwater environments. These powerful hunters can reach lengths of up to 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with muscular bodies built for explosive bursts of speed reaching 25 miles per hour. Their broad, flat snouts house rows of triangular, serrated teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Bull sharks possess exceptional sensory capabilities, including the ability to detect electrical fields generated by living creatures and sense vibrations from great distances. Their territorial nature and opportunistic feeding behavior make them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other shark species except great whites. At 6:45 a.m., Leela entered the murky water approximately 50 yards from shore, where visibility had been reduced to less than 3 feet due to recent storms and heavy fishing activity. The area directly beneath Ponce Inlet Pier had become a feeding hotspot, with discarded bait and fish blood creating an irresistible attraction for predators. A 6-foot female bull shark had been patrolling these waters since before dawn, following the scent trails left by fleeing baitfish. Leela's fatal mistake occurred when she began snorkeling in the exact location where local fishermen had been chumming the water for hours. Her splashing movements and erratic swimming pattern closely resembled those of distressed or injured fish, triggering the shark's predatory instincts. The bull shark approached from the murky depths below, using the poor visibility as perfect cover for an ambush attack. The shark struck with lightning speed, its powerful tail propelling its 300-pound body upward through the water column. The first bite clamped down on Leela's left leg just above the knee, the shark's razor-sharp teeth slicing through muscle, tendons, and bone with surgical precision. The serrated edges of the teeth, designed like miniature saw blades, severed her femoral artery completely, causing massive hemorrhaging that immediately turned the surrounding water crimson. Leela's body went into immediate shock as blood pressure dropped rapidly from that catastrophic blood loss. The shark's powerful jaws, capable of exerting 1,350 pounds per square inch of pressure, crushed her femur bone like brittled wood. The bull shark's feeding response activated as the taste of blood flooded its sensory system, triggering a second, devastating attack. The predator's second bite targeted Leela's torso, its teeth puncturing through her rib cage and penetrating vital organs. The shark's thrashing motion tore massive chunks of flesh from her body, creating wounds that would have been fatal even with immediate medical intervention. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds before the shark disappeared back into the murky depths, leaving Leela floating motionless in an expanding pool of blood. Marcus witnessed the attack from the pier and immediately dove into the water, reaching Leela within 2 minutes of the initial strike. Beachgoers formed a human chain to help pull her toward shore while others called emergency services. Despite the rapid response, Leela had already lost consciousness from hypovolemic shock caused by the massive blood loss. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and attempted aggressive resuscitation efforts, but the severity of her injuries proved insurmountable. Leela was pronounced dead at Halifax Health Medical Center 45 minutes after the attack, becoming the first fatal shark attack in Volusia County in over a decade. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by marine biologists and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Officials determined that recent weather patterns had concentrated baitfish populations near the pier, creating ideal hunting conditions for large predators. Lisa's family established a foundation promoting ocean safety education, emphasizing the importance of understanding marine ecosystems before entering the water. It was December 9, 2017. The morning heat over Lake Victoria clung to the forest edges of Nagamba Island as a group of visitors gathered along the fence line of the chimpanzee sanctuary. staff members moved through the routine feeding with practiced calm, tossing fruit over the enclosure walls while instructing tourists to remain behind designated barriers. On the far end of the viewing zone, a small break in protocol, a crouched figure leaning past the postmark boundary went mostly unnoticed until it was far too late. Muriel Durand was a 62-year-old retired French schoolteacher from Clermont-Ferrand who had arrived in Uganda 3 days earlier on a volunteer ecotourism program with her younger sister. She had spent her career teaching literature and had taken up wildlife travel during retirement. This trip was her fourth to Africa and her first time volunteering in a conservation context. Friends described her as thoughtful and methodical, someone who planned each day down to the hour. On Ngamba, she had expressed particular interest in the chimpanzees, especially photographing them up close. The sanctuary staff had guided the group through safety procedures that morning. Maintain a 10-foot distance from any enclosure fencing. Never crouch or turn your back. And follow staff instructions during feeding times when the animals, especially dominant males, could become more agitated. For most of the season, Durand followed directions. But near the end, as others moved away toward the visitor center, she lingered near a corner where a juvenile chimp hung upside down from a low branch. She crouched with her back to the main gate, raising her phone to take a final selfie. A keeper shouted for her to step back. She didn't move. Chimpanzees are genetically close to humans but physically far stronger. Adult males can be 5 to 7 times stronger than an adult male, with the ability to exert over 1,300 pounds of force per square inch in their bite. They are territorial and hierarchical creatures, with dominant individuals prone to explosive aggression, particularly during feeding periods or perceived intrusions. Their massive canine teeth, up to 2 inches long, are designed to tear flesh, while their powerful arms can easily dismember prey. Though rare, chimpanzee attacks on humans, especially in sanctuary or captivity settings, have been documented to result in severe facial trauma, limb injuries, and dismemberment due to their method of attacking the face and extremities. The adult male involved in this incident, nicknamed Kusa, had recently asserted dominance within the group and had shown food-aggressive behavior in previous weeks. On that morning, a secondary enclosure gate used by the keepers to pass food trays was not fully latched. During the commotion of the feeding, Kusa slipped through unnoticed. No one saw him approach until he was already outside the enclosure. He sprinted directly toward Durand with terrifying speed. Her sister and 2 staff members yelled in alarm, but the distance between them was too great. Kusa grabbed Durand from behind and yanked her backward by the shoulder of her shirt, dragging her several feet across the dirt toward the fence line with devastating force. She screamed once. Within seconds, 2 more chimps, juveniles by size but still incredibly powerful, followed through the open gate. What followed lasted under 10 seconds, but would haunt witnesses for the rest of their lives. One chimp seized her forearm and bit through the flesh at the elbow with bone-crushing force. Another clawed at her face with razor-sharp nails. Kusa stood over her, striking downward repeatedly with both fists and biting at the side of her head with his massive canines. A keeper attempted to intervene with a water hose and loud banging on the gate panel, but was knocked off balance by one of the juveniles and forced to retreat. Durand's sister, in shock, stood just outside the viewing zone and later described an eruption of screaming and movement, like watching a group turn into something else entirely. By the time the staff managed to drive the animals back into the enclosure using poles and barriers, Durand was no longer moving. She had lost part of her scalp and right hand. Her clothing was shredded, and she had sustained severe lacerations to her face and throat. She was briefly stabilized by the island's on-site medic team before being airlifted by helicopter to Entebbe. The aircraft had been dispatched from the mainland and reached the island in just over 40 minutes. Despite emergency transfusions and surgery at a private hospital in Entebbe, she died 6 hours later from blood loss and traumatic brain injury. The Ngamba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary was closed to visitors indefinitely the following day. Internal reviews confirmed the gate latch failure as the primary cause of the breach, but also noted that Durand had stepped outside the designated safety zone in violation of staff warnings. French consular officials assisted with repatriation. Her remains were flown to France on December 14th. The sanctuary released a brief statement of condolence and undertook immediate changes to the feeding area, including double gate locking systems and an extended perimeter barrier. No animals were euthanized. Ugandan Wildlife Authority officials ruled that the chimps had acted in line with typical stress-aggression behavior. It was April 22, 2016, at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo in Nebraska. The weather was mild and the sky was clear. There were fewer visitors than on busy weekends, so the walkways felt open. Families moved slowly along shaded paths, pushing strollers or stopping to look at exhibits. A few small school groups were scattered around, reading signs and taking quick photos. The sounds were a mix of quiet conversation, the shuffle of feet on pavement, and distant bird calls from other parts of the zoo. Near the gorilla enclosure, nothing seemed unusual. Among the visitors was 29-year-old Asha Najiri, who had been living in Des Moines, Iowa. Originally from Kenya, she was studying to become a nurse. Her classmates described her as quiet, friendly, and patient. She liked taking her time when exploring new places, and often kept photo albums on her phone from trips and outings. She had never seen primates up close before, but she often said she wanted to. When her nursing program organized a weekend trip to Omaha, she joined for a short break from studying and clinical work. Asha treated photography as part of her routine wherever she traveled. She liked capturing memories, but wasn't someone who took big risks to get a shot. The zoo, with its fences and enclosures, felt safe. The idea that something inside could reach her didn't seem likely. As her group made their way through the exhibits, she watched with her phone in hand, stopping now and then to take pictures. The gorilla enclosure was one of the larger primate habitats in the zoo. It had open grassy areas, climbing structures, and ropes between tall posts. A wide moat curved in front of the viewing rail, acting as a barrier between the animals and visitors. Beyond the moat, shrubs and trees offered shade where the gorillas could rest out of view. The setup was open enough that people could see the animals clearly without a glass wall in between. That day, it was quiet near the rail, with only soft background chatter from other visitors. The troop's silverback was large, weighing about 400 pounds. Adult males that size can cover short distances quickly up to 20 miles per hour, and their strength is many times greater than a person's. In the wild, they defend their group by bluff charging or, if provoked, by making physical contact. Their jaws and teeth are capable of causing serious injuries in seconds. Asha's group stopped at the rail when they noticed the silverback resting near the narrowest part of the moat, occasionally glancing toward the visitors. A sign posted at the rail reminded guests to keep back and avoid leaning over. Asha stepped forward, crouching slightly to frame both herself and the gorilla in a selfie. She leaned forward to get a better angle, holding her phone just above the rail. One of the zoo staff members nearby reminded Asha to step back. She paused, glanced at her phone, and shifted slightly to frame her shot. Her classmates stood a short distance away, talking among themselves and not sensing any danger. Asha leaned forward again, just a little farther this time. In that quick moment, her balance gave out, and she toppled forward, slipping over the rail and into the enclosure. Visitors nearby gasped, some calling out for help. Asha landed hard on the grassy edge near the moat. The impact left her disoriented, struggling to move. The silverback, drawn by the noise and sudden motion, rose to his feet. His body tensed, and he moved quickly toward her. Before she could stand, he struck with both hands, knocking her flat onto the ground. Witnesses saw him grip her upper arm and bite down hard. He bit again into the side of her neck. The force caused deep wounds immediately. He dragged her several feet before stopping, still holding her down. Two younger gorillas moved toward the moat, making short vocalizations and pacing. The silverback kept his focus on Asha, his posture blocking her from others. Zoo staff reacted quickly. Loud bangs and blasts from a high-pressure water cannon were used to push the gorillas back. The silverback released her after several moments and retreated across the moat. Other staff members moved in, pulling her away from the edge and starting first aid. Asha's injuries were severe. She had heavy bleeding from her neck and arm and was unresponsive. Paramedics arrived within minutes and worked on her at the scene. But the trauma was too extensive. She was pronounced dead before she could be moved for transport. The zoo closed the gorilla exhibit immediately and relocated the troop to an indoor holding area. Officials later explained that the silverback's behavior was likely a defensive reaction to her leaning over the barrier. They stressed that while the rail and moat are meant to keep visitors safe, getting too close can still provoke a response from the animals. Asha's body was returned to Iowa for burial. Her classmates organized a candlelight vigil on campus a few days later, sharing photos of her from earlier trips. The zoo issued a short written statement expressing condolences to her family and friends. Local news outlets reported the incident, but coverage was limited outside the region. The enclosure's barriers were later inspected, and additional signs were placed to remind visitors not to lean over the rail. It was April 4th, 2013. The midday heat in the lower Satpura Hills shimmered over the dusty ridges. Wind moved in irregular gusts, stirring loose grit along the trail. Pravin Joshi, walking alone with the GPS unit in hand, paused along a narrow ridge path to check coordinates. Behind him, unseen but watching, a female sloth bear had already begun to close the distance. Pravin Joshi was a 41-year-old field officer with Maharashtra's irrigation department who had worked over a decade mapping terrain for small-scale canal and dam proposals. He was considered dependable by his supervisors, experienced with rough terrain, competent with handheld equipment, and known to travel light. Off hours, he had a hobbyist interest in wildlife photography, especially larger mammals. He often posted grainy but earnest snapshots from field assignments to his social media feed. This trip was a solo route survey, just over 6 miles, tracing potential canal sites through a remote corner of the Satpura Range. His field notes later confirm he had completed 2 of his 5 checkpoints and was between designated trails when the attack occurred. GPS logs showed a deviation, likely a shortcut along a ridge linking 2 valleys. At 1:17 p.m., a forest ranger posted 330 feet downslope spotted him pausing by a rock outcrop and raising his phone. Joshi likely believed he had a safe vantage point. In the near distance below, a sloth bear and 2 cubs moved through scrub, mostly hidden from his view. Sloth bears are among Asia's most aggressive bear species, averaging 5 to 6 feet in length and weighing up to 300 pounds. Their massive claws, designed for tearing apart termite mounds, can grow up to 3 inches long and are capable of inflicting devastating wounds. Female bears with cubs are particularly dangerous, as their maternal instinct to protect their young overrides any natural caution. Defensive encounters often result in severe head and facial injuries, as sloth bears typically target the face and skull of perceived threats. The terrain around Joshi was dry, with scattered boulders and sparse undergrowth, typical of the early summer transition. Trees thinned toward the ridge, and visibility was reduced by uneven rock and the steep fall-off on one side. Bears in this region are active during the day, especially females with cubs. The ranger stationed to monitor illegal woodcutting in the valley saw the bear rise briefly from behind brush before beginning its charge. He shouted desperately, but Joshi did not appear to hear the warning. The ranger fired a warning shot into the air as the bear charged, but it kept going. By the time Joshi reacted, the bear had already covered most of the slope, estimated at 200 feet in under 10 seconds. Joshi turned just as the animal crested the ridge with terrifying speed. The first contact was a swipe, heavy and fast, striking the left side of Joshi's face with devastating force. He dropped the phone and staggered sideways into the dust. The bear was on him instantly, clawing at his head, neck, and arms with its massive 3-inch claws. Joshi rolled and tried to protect his face, but the bear bit through his forearm and struck again at the base of his skull. The witness described rapid, chaotic movement, dust thrown into the air, Joshi's legs kicking, the bear rising and dropping as it mauled repeatedly with brutal efficiency. A second shot was fired by the ranger, closer this time, but it did nothing. Only after a third shot cracked through the air did the bear finally hesitate, lift its head, and bolt downhill with the cubs. The entire event ended in a minute. By the time the ranger reached the site, Joshi was unresponsive. His shirt was shredded and the ground soaked in blood. Multiple lacerations exposed bone, and his jaw and eye socket were crushed beyond recognition. He showed no signs of breathing. A Forest Service team called in by the ranger recovered the body just after 5 p.m., using a makeshift stretcher and pack mule support. His equipment, GPS unit, phone, notebook, was collected nearby, covered in dust and blood. The final photo on his device was unclear but showed the trail curving into scrub, with a black shape barely visible in the distance. The phone had been cracked in the fall but remained functional. The official report confirmed Joshi had deviated from his assigned path without informing local rangers. While he had appropriate field permissions, his detour placed him within a known wildlife corridor during cub rearing season. The sloth bear was not tracked or euthanized, as its behavior was ruled defensive and consistent with regional norms. Joshi's funeral was held in Nagpur with state employee honors. His department provided travel assistance to family members. Wildlife officials reiterated standard guidance. Field staff should avoid solo work in known bear habitats during spring months, and no photos should be taken near visible animals. It was September 22, 2015, when the rugged wilderness of Angeles National Forest in California became the backdrop for a deadly encounter that would shock the hiking community. The San Gabriel Mountains rose majestically around the Gabrielino Trail, their granite peaks catching the first rays of dawn as ancient oak trees cast long shadows across the rocky terrain. Switzer Falls lay hidden deep within the canyon, where crystal-clear water cascaded over moss-covered boulders. The remote location, accessible only by a challenging 5-mile trek through dense chaparral, attracted those seeking solitude away from crowded trails. Tiffany Monroe, a 31-year-old travel blogger from Los Angeles, had built her reputation documenting Southern California's hidden gems for her growing online audience. Her fearless approach to solo hiking and wildlife photography had earned her thousands of followers who eagerly awaited her latest adventures. That morning, she had set out before sunrise to capture the perfect shots of Switzer Falls during the golden hour. Tiffany's extensive hiking experience in the region had made her confident about navigating the challenging terrain alone, though she had never encountered the area's most elusive and dangerous predator. The mountain lion stands as North America's second largest cat and one of its most efficient predators. These solitary hunters can reach lengths of 8 feet and weights of up to 180 pounds, with powerful hindquarters capable of propelling them in leaps exceeding 40 feet horizontally and 15 feet vertically. Their retractable claws, measuring up to 2 inches long, provide deadly weapons for grasping prey, while their muscular jaws deliver crushing bite forces of 400 pounds per square inch. Mountain lions possess exceptional night vision and hearing, making them nearly invisible stalkers in their natural habitat. Their territorial nature and opportunistic hunting behavior have adapted perfectly to the rugged terrain of Southern California's mountains. At 6:20 a.m., Tiffany encountered a 120-pound male mountain lion sunning himself on a granite boulder formation approximately 200 yards from the main trail. The cat appeared relaxed in the early morning warmth, his tawny coat blending seamlessly with the sun-bleached rock. This particular male was an older animal whose prime territory had been claimed by younger cats, forcing him into marginal habitat where competition for food had made him increasingly aggressive. Tiffany's fatal mistake occurred when she approached to within 20 feet of the resting predator, believing the animal would flee like smaller wildlife she had previously encountered. She crouched down low and extended her phone toward the cat, unknowingly mimicking the posture and movements of prey animals. The mountain lion's predatory instincts immediately recognized these behaviors as vulnerability signals. The cat's pupils dilated as his hunting instincts activated, and his tail began twitching rapidly. His powerful hindquarters coiled like springs as he shifted into an attack position, every muscle tensing for the explosive leap that would follow. When Tiffany made direct eye contact while maintaining her crouched position, the mountain lion interpreted this as a direct challenge. The attack began with devastating speed as the cougar launched himself through the air in a single fluid motion. His 120-pound body struck Tiffany with tremendous force, knocking her backward onto the rocky ground. The cat's razor-sharp claws extended fully, digging deep into her shoulders and chest as he established his grip. The mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on Tiffany's neck with surgical precision, his 4 canine teeth penetrating through skin, muscle, and cartilage to reach vital structures beneath. The cat's bite targeted the carotid artery and jugular vein simultaneously, causing massive hemorrhaging that flooded her airway and cut off blood flow to her brain. His teeth punctured completely through her neck, severing the spinal cord at the second cervical vertebra. Tiffany's body went limp immediately as the spinal cord injury caused instant paralysis and respiratory failure. The mountain lion maintained his death grip for nearly 2 minutes, ensuring his prey couldn't escape. The combination of massive blood loss, airway obstruction, and spinal cord trauma caused death within 90 seconds of the initial attack. After confirming his kill, the mountain lion began dragging his prey to a secluded location. Using his incredible strength, he pulled Tiffany's body 50 feet into dense manzanita brush where he could feed undisturbed. Search and rescue teams discovered Tiffany's remains 3 days later after her failure to return prompted concerned friends to contact authorities. Wildlife officials located and tracked the responsible mountain lion, which was ultimately euthanized according to state protocols. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife conducted a thorough investigation, determining that drought conditions had reduced the mountain lion's natural prey populations, forcing the animal into more aggressive hunting behaviors. Tiffany's family advocated for improved trail safety education and better warning systems in areas with known mountain lion activity. It was June 28, 2014. The Limbay Wildlife Center buzzed with the usual low activity. Keepers tending to enclosures, a few guided visitors moving between habitats. For the staff, it was another humid day of routine checks. But for one visiting volunteer from France, what should have been a quiet stop on a sanctuary tour became something far more violent. Lisette Marchand was a 38-year-old botanist who had arrived in Cameroon 3 weeks prior. On sabbatical from her public service role in Toulouse, she was volunteering with a French NGO involved in reforestation along the degraded slopes of Mount Cameroon. Known among colleagues for her calm demeanor and affinity for wildlife photography, Lisette had quickly taken an interest in the Limbe Sanctuary's rescue work. That morning, she joined 4 other international volunteers on an off-day tour arranged by local staff, an informal visit to the animal center located on the outskirts of the town. Lisette was especially drawn to primates, having previously written a blog series about conservation ethics and species sentience. When the group reached the enclosure of Mukoko, an adult male western lowland gorilla rescued 2 years prior from illegal captivity, she lingered behind the group. Western lowland gorillas are among the strongest animals on Earth, with adult males weighing up to 440 pounds and possessing the strength of 10 adult humans. Their massive arms span over 8 feet and are equipped with hands capable of crushing bone with minimal effort. A gorilla's bite force can exceed 1,300 pounds per square inch, nearly twice that of a lion. Mukoko, though fed and kept in partial view of the public, was not fully acclimated to human presence. A posted placard stated this clearly, as did the keeper on duty, who gave a verbal warning when he noticed Lisette kneeling close to the secondary fence with her phone angled toward her face. She acknowledged him with a smile but remained crouched, focused on framing the perfect shot. The fence was a double-gated system. The inner gate separated Mukoko's main living space from a smaller feeding zone. In the outer wire mesh enclosed both areas from visitor access. But that morning, in the rush of routine, the keeper failed to fully secure the inner latch, an oversight not uncommon during busy feeding hours. It created a small but critical vulnerability, one that would soon prove catastrophic. The attack began in terrifying silence. Without vocalizing or displaying any warning behavior, Mukoko suddenly charged with explosive force. He slammed his full body weight, nearly 370 pounds, into the inner gate with such tremendous impact that the latch gave way with a loud metallic snap. The gorilla surged into the feeding zone and directly toward the outer edge, where Lisette was still kneeling, completely unaware of the approaching danger. Before she could rise or turn to flee, Mukoko reached through the mesh opening and seized her by the hair with one of his massive hands. Witnesses recalled the sickening thud, followed by a choking scream that cut off abruptly as Mukoko yanked her forward against the fence with tremendous force. He began striking her rapidly, first with open palms that delivered blows equivalent to being hit with sledgehammers, then with the sides of his fists that landed like wrecking balls against her fragile human frame. The blows landed on her head, shoulders, and upper torso. Each strike was delivered with the full force of muscles that had evolved over millions of years to break branches, tear vegetation, and defend against predators. The other volunteers backed away in horror, shouting for help, while one ran toward the main office. The keeper on duty grabbed stones and began hurling them at the gorilla, joined moments later by a second staffer armed with a bucket of fruit. Mukoko didn't respond to their desperate attempts at distraction. For nearly 40 seconds, he remained hunched over Lisette's limp form, breathing heavily, swatting at anyone who dared approach his victim. Eventually, Mukoko retreated several feet, drawn by the scent of bananas and plantains that the keepers had scattered as a distraction. The staff quickly shut the gate behind them. Lisette was unconscious, her face bruised beyond recognition, and one eye swollen completely shut. Her shirt was torn, ribs visibly caved in from the tremendous force of the gorilla's blows. The others helped carry her to the center's old Land Cruiser, her body limp and broken from the savage attacks. The nearest medical post was 6 miles away along an uneven road. She went into cardiac arrest during the desperate drive, her damaged organs finally succumbing to the trauma. Attempts to resuscitate her at the understaffed clinic failed. Her injuries were simply too severe. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the chest and skull. She had multiple broken ribs, one piercing a lung, leading to internal bleeding and respiratory failure. Her cervical spine was also badly damaged from the initial pull against the wire mesh. French consular staff coordinated transport of her remains back to Toulouse. Her parents held a small private service, attended by colleagues who remembered her passion for conservation. The Limbey Wildlife Center issued a single-page press statement calling the event a tragic and unforeseeable accident. Within a month, the gorilla enclosure was refitted with reinforced latches and a 3-step gate protocol. Makoko remained at the center under increased observation. Staff argued that the failure was structural rather than behavioral, ignoring the fundamental reality that captive gorillas remain wild animals capable of explosive violence. It was July 15, 2016, when tragedy struck the pristine wilderness of Glacier National Park in Montana. The rugged terrain around Logan Pass stretched endlessly, with towering peaks piercing the summer sky and dense forest of lodgepole pine creating a natural maze below the tree line. Huckleberry bushes dotted the landscape, their purple fruit ripening in the warm afternoon sun, creating an irresistible feast for the park's most formidable residents. The area's remote location, accessible only by the winding Going to the Sun road, had attracted millions of visitors seeking untamed wilderness experiences. Sabrina Caldwell, a 24-year-old social media marketing coordinator from Denver, had arrived with her college friends Maya Chen and Jessica Torres for what was supposed to be a memorable weekend camping adventure. The trio were experienced day hikers who had conquered numerous Colorado trails, but this marked their first expedition into true grizzly country. Sabrina's confident personality and love for documenting their cross-country national park tour had driven them to seek increasingly dramatic backdrops for their hiking photos. The friends had planned to tackle the famous Highline Trail, unaware that recent bear activity had prompted park officials to issue closure warnings for several off-trail areas. Their campsite at Apgar have buzzed with stories from other visitors about recent wildlife sightings, creating an atmosphere of excitement mixed with underlying tension. The North American grizzly bear stands as one of the continent's apex predators, with adult females weighing up to 400 pounds and possessing strength 5 times greater than humans. These massive omnivores spend summer months consuming up to 20,000 calories daily, preparing for winter hibernation. Their exceptional hearing and sense of smell, combined with surprising speed reaching 35 miles per hour, make them formidable hunters. Grizzlies become particularly aggressive when protecting cubs or defending food sources, with maternal instincts triggering violent defensive responses to perceived threats. Their intelligence and memory capabilities allow them to associate humans with food sources, making habituated bears extremely dangerous to encounter. At around 4:15 p.m., the group encountered a 350-pound female grizzly approximately 100 yards from the designated Highline Trail. The sow was methodically feeding on huckleberries, her massive frame moving gracefully through the dense brush. Sabrina spotted the bear through the trees and quietly separated from her companions, believing she could capture the perfect wildlife photograph from a closer vantage point. Despite Maya's and Jessica's urgent whispers to return, Sabrina continued approaching until she reached a position roughly 30 feet from the feeding animal. The critical mistake occurred when Sabrina stepped onto loose rocks while positioning herself for the shot. The sudden noise caused the grizzly to lift her massive head and lock eyes with the intruder. Unknown to Sabrina, 2 small cubs were foraging nearby, invisible in the thick undergrowth. The mother bear's protective instincts immediately activated as she perceived Sabrina as a direct threat to her offspring. The sow stood on her hind legs, reaching nearly 8 feet in height, and began huffing loudly while clacking her teeth together in an unmistakable warning display. When Sabrina raised her phone, the bear interpreted this movement as an aggressive gesture. The grizzly dropped to all fours and launched into a devastating charge across the rocky terrain, her powerful legs propelling her massive body at 25 miles per hour. Sabrina turned to flee but stumbled onto the uneven ground after taking only 5 steps. The bear's enormous paw, equipped with 4-inch claws, struck her across the back with tremendous force, sending her crashing face first into the rocky soil. The impact alone fractured 2 ribs and caused severe lacerations across her shoulder blades. The grizzly's massive jaws, capable of exerting 975 pounds per square inch of pressure, clamped down on Sabrina's neck and shoulder region. The bear's 3-inch canine teeth punctured through muscle and bone, severing her carotid artery and crushing her cervical vertebrae. The sow shook Sabrina violently for approximately 15 seconds, her powerful neck muscles whipping the victim's body like a rag doll. The attack ceased as abruptly as it began when the mother bear heard her cubs calling from the brush. She immediately released Sabrina's motionless form and retreated to gather her young, disappearing into the dense forest within moments. Maya and Jessica, who had witnessed the horrific encounter from the safety of the main trail, immediately contacted park rangers via emergency radio. A helicopter rescue team arrived 35 minutes later, but Sabrina had already succumbed to massive blood loss and spinal cord trauma. The incident prompted a comprehensive investigation by park officials, who determined that recent drought conditions had concentrated berry-producing plants in specific areas, creating higher bear densities than normal. Sabrina's family released a statement, emphasizing the importance of respecting wildlife boundaries and following park safety protocols. The National Park Service implemented additional warning systems and increased ranger patrols in high-risk areas. It was June 11, 2016. The light over Lake George had softened to orange by early evening, bouncing off still water and thick cypress trunks. In the background, laughter drifted from a small group gathered near the dock of a public RV campsite. Coolers open, grills cooling, a Bluetooth speaker humming low. The mood was relaxed, almost dull from heat and beer. Then the water moved, slow and gliding, dark against the surface. Deshaun Carter was a 36-year-old HVAC contractor from Daytona Beach. Known for his easygoing attitude and big weekend barbecues, he was the one cousin everyone called to fix a unit or help move furniture. He'd taken the weekend off to join a birthday gathering for his younger cousin at a rented RV site on the western shore of Lake George. They'd been there since Friday, fishing, drinking, and waiting along the boat ramp. Around nighttime, a juvenile alligator passed along the edge of the reeds. It wasn't large, maybe 6 or 7 feet, but it cut a noticeable wake. Someone joked it looked close. Carter turned to the group, announcing he could get a shot with it like it was a statue, and started wading out, shoes off, phone in hand. His cousin Jamal warned him to stop. So did 2 others. Carter waved them off, insisting it wasn't even looking at him. The gator submerged. What Carter likely didn't fully appreciate was that American alligators are ambush predators. Males grow up to 15 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their massive jaws can snap shut with a force of 3,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. And when they strike, it's sudden and devastating, typically targeting extremities before executing a powerful death roll designed to incapacitate and drown their prey. The shoreline was shallow and muddy, sloping gradually from cypress roots to waist-deep water. Carter moved out to a flat patch just above his knees and crouched. The last photo on his phone shows reeds and rippling water. He was still joking, asking someone to zoom in when it came back up. What happened next was witnessed by 3 people from about 30 feet away. A sudden churn erupted from the water just feet from where Carter crouched. An alligator surged upward, jaws open wide. It clamped onto his lower left leg with a loud crack that echoed across the water. Carter screamed and fell backward into the murky lake. Before anyone could react, the gator released and lunged again, this time locking onto his side beneath the ribs with devastating precision. Jamal threw a cooler and another friend ran forward shouting desperately, but the alligator rolled, tight, fast, and deliberate, taking Carter with it in the signature death roll. His body twisted once, then again, disappearing beneath dark water as the prehistoric predator executed its killing technique with brutal efficiency. The surface exploded with foam and blood, then calmed. The attack lasted under 30 seconds. 911 was called immediately by people present. Campground rangers arrived within minutes, followed by wildlife conservation officers who began sonar scans of the area before nightfall. Boats with spotlights searched the shoreline into the early morning. A bloody t-shirt and fragments of denim were recovered by 11 p.m., but the water remained too murky for full recovery. The next day, 3 adult gators were trapped in the vicinity using baited hooks. 2 were over 9 feet long. The third, measuring just under 8 feet, was euthanized and later confirmed to contain human remains. Partial skeletal fragments were retrieved from the stomach. Positive identification was made by dental records on June 13th. Carter's funeral was held quietly in Daytona Beach the following Saturday. The church parking lot overflowed. Friends described him as the one who always showed up, the guy who never let a family gathering go by without telling stories and cracking jokes. The family requested privacy and no interviews were given. Authorities issued a brief reminder about alligator safety, reiterating that no charges were pending and that the lake remained open. At the campsite, the only visible change was a new laminated sign nailed to the dock railing warning visitors not to enter the water due to reported alligator activity. It was May 17, 2018, when the pristine wilderness of Big Cypress National Preserve in Florida became the setting for a deadly encounter that would shock wildlife officials across the state. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched endlessly in all directions, with ancient cypress trees rising from dark waters. Loop Road wound through the heart of the preserve, crossing dozens of narrow canals where sawgrass and cattails created perfect hiding spots for the area's most dangerous residents. Danielle Kirkwood, a 29-year-old fitness instructor from Chicago, had traveled to South Florida with 4 college sorority sisters for what was supposed to be a celebratory bachelorette party weekend. The group had spent the day visiting various scenic locations throughout the Everglades region, taking increasingly adventurous photos for their social media accounts. Danielle's athletic background and competitive personality had made her the natural leader of their photography expeditions, always pushing for more dramatic shots than her more cautious friends preferred. The American alligator stands as one of North America's most ancient and powerful predators, having survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. These apex hunters can reach lengths exceeding 14 feet and weights of up to 1,000 pounds, with muscular bodies perfectly adapted for explosive attacks from concealment. Their massive jaws contain 74 to 80 razor-sharp teeth designed to grip and crush prey, delivering bite forces reaching 3,000 pounds per square inch. Alligators possess exceptional sensory capabilities, including the ability to detect vibrations in water from great distances. At 7:15 p.m., the group had stopped along a scenic section of Loop Road where a narrow canal ran parallel to the pavement. Danielle spotted what she believed would be the perfect backdrop in the shallow water approximately 30 feet from the road. A 9-foot male alligator had been resting motionless in the murky water for over 2 hours, perfectly camouflaged among the submerged logs and vegetation. Danielle's fatal mistake occurred when she ignored multiple warning signs and waded into the restricted waterway, believing the knee-deep water posed no significant threat. Her friends called out warnings from the roadside, but their concerns were dismissed. The alligator remained completely still as Danielle approached, calculating the optimal moment to strike. The critical trigger came when Danielle turned her back to the hidden predator while positioning herself for the selfie. Her movement created vibrations that the alligator's sensitive lateral line system detected immediately, while her splashing mimicked the stress signals of wounded prey animals. The attack began with explosive violence as the 9-foot alligator launched himself from the water with tremendous speed. His massive jaws opened to reveal rows of canonical teeth before clamping down on Danielle's right thigh with crushing force. The initial bite fractured her femur bone and severed the femoral artery, causing immediate massive hemorrhaging that turned the surrounding water crimson. The alligator's 2,125 pounds per square inch of bite force crushed through muscle, bone, and major blood vessels. The reptile's serrated teeth locked into her flesh with a grip that no human strength could break. The alligator immediately began backing toward deeper water, dragging his prey away from the shoreline. The predator's instinctive death roll began as he reached the water deep enough to submerge completely. The massive reptile spun rapidly, using rotational force to disorient its prey and cause additional catastrophic injuries. Danielle's body was whipped through the water with tremendous violence, the spinning motion fracturing multiple ribs and causing severe internal bleeding. The alligator maintained his death grip while continuing the rolling motion for nearly 45 seconds, each rotation driving his teeth deeper. The combination of massive blood loss from the severed femoral artery and violent trauma sent her body into irreversible shock within the first minute. As Danielle's struggles weakened, the alligator dragged her into water over 6 feet deep, where his natural instincts drove him to drown his prey. The reptile held her underwater while maintaining his crushing bite. Danielle lost consciousness from blood loss and oxygen deprivation within 2 minutes of the initial attack. Her 4 friends screamed and threw rocks into the water, attempting to distract the massive predator. One friend called 911 while others continued making noise, trying to drive the alligator away from Danielle's motionless form. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes, but Danielle had already been underwater for over 8 minutes. Wildlife officers used long poles to drive the alligator away before recovering her body. Paramedics attempted resuscitation efforts, but the combination of massive blood loss, drowning, and severe trauma had caused irreversible damage. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission conducted a thorough investigation, determining that recent dry conditions had concentrated alligator populations in remaining water sources. The responsible alligator was located and removed the following day. Danielle's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the preserve, arguing that warning signs were insufficient. The incident prompted renewed calls for enhanced safety measures throughout Florida's state parks. Danielle Kirkwood's story was a tragic reminder of how quickly ancient predators can turn deadly when humans enter their domain. It was October 16, 2017. Rain had passed through Gunung National Park that morning, leaving the dirt roads around Bukit Lawang slick with mud and scattered with fallen leaves. At the Wildlife Rescue Center built to rehabilitate animals seized from the illegal pet trade, the afternoon shift was winding down toward dusk. In the primate wing, no alarms were sounding, and no emergencies were anticipated. But in the space of 40 seconds, everything would change forever. Rizgi Adawan was a 19-year-old biology student at Medan University who had been volunteering at the Bukit Lawang Wildlife Rescue Center for nearly 4 months. His weekend duties included cleaning animal enclosures, preparing feed for juvenile orangutans and macaques, and maintaining detailed logs of animal behavior patterns. Staff members liked him for his humor and enthusiasm, though they had grown concerned about his habit of taking phone videos with the animals during breaks, often joking about starting a nature vlog channel. Buddy, a chimpanzee, had been confiscated during a wildlife trafficking raid in Aceh 4 years earlier. Chimpanzees possess 5 times the pulling strength of an average human, with muscle fibers that can generate explosive power in their arms and hands. Even juvenile males entering adolescence can exert over 1,200 pounds of force per square inch with their bite, easily crushing bone and tearing through muscle tissue. At 6 years old, Buddy was entering the most dangerous phase of chimpanzee development, when adolescent males become increasingly territorial and aggressive. Raised in captivity since infancy, he displayed the behavioral abnormalities common to improperly socialized chimpanzees: unpredictable mood shifts, obsessive fixation on human faces, and sudden violent outbursts triggered by seemingly minor stimuli. Staff had repeatedly warned volunteers about maintaining safe distances from all primates, particularly Buddy, who was housed in semi-isolation due to his history of attacking handlers. His enclosure featured reinforced mesh barriers and a gated transfer chute designed to minimize human contact, but the outer cage bars still allowed limited visibility and access from the walkway. That afternoon, just after 4 p.m., Rizgi and another volunteer named Iwan were completing their final enclosure checks. Most senior staff members were inside the main building conducting a feeding schedule meeting, leaving the 2 students largely unsupervised in the primate wing. Buddy was pacing restlessly in the outer run of his enclosure, his dark eyes tracking their movements with intense focus. Rizgi apparently decided that this was the perfect opportunity for social media content. He extended a selfie stick with his phone attached, kneeling sideways near the edge of the cage with his face approximately 2 feet from the steel bars. He laughed and told Iwan to make sure the chimp didn't steal his phone, then leaned closer to frame the perfect shot. But Buddy struck with lightning speed. The chimpanzee's right hand shot through the bars and clamped around Rizgi's forearm with crushing force. The sudden yank pulled the student off balance, sending him crashing face first into the concrete lip beside the enclosure. Before he could push himself up or pull away, Buddy's other arm reached through the bars and grabbed a handful of hair. With both arms now engaged, the chimp began systematically smashing Rizgi's head against the steel bars in repeated violent motions. The sounds echoed through the corridor, flesh striking metal, the grunts of the enraged animal, and Iwan's terrified screams for help. Each impact drove Rizgi's skull against the unforgiving steel with bone-crushing force. Iwan sprinted toward the main office, his shouts alerting a senior handler who grabbed a tranquilizer dart gun and raced back toward the primate wing. But the attack had already escalated beyond any hope of intervention. In the seconds it took to load and fire the dart, Buddy had sunk his 2-inch canine teeth deep into Rizgi's neck and shoulder, tearing through major blood vessels. The sedative finally took effect, causing Buddy to release his grip and retreat to the far end of his cage with jerky, uncoordinated movements. Rizgi lay motionless on the concrete walkway, blood pooling around his head and spreading across the floor in an ever-widening circle. Staff members immediately secured Buddy in an isolation chamber and attempted emergency first aid on Rizgi. No pulse could be detected. He was rushed by van to a small hospital in Bohorok, but doctors declared him dead on arrival from massive blood loss and catastrophic cranial injuries. Within 24 hours, the Wildlife Center released a brief public statement describing the event as a tragic accident and immediately suspended all volunteer access to primate enclosures. Buddy was not euthanized, but transferred to a more secure off-site facility while housing protocols underwent complete revision. Rizgi's family in Medan received private condolences from both the center and the university. No lawsuits were filed against the facility. The biology department held the quiet memorial service where professors spoke of Rizgi's passion for animals and his dreams of pursuing field research. The center has since installed additional physical barriers and banned all personal devices near primate enclosures. But among long-term staff members, the incident serves as a permanent reminder of how quickly observation can transform into violence. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.